Yeah, so we were discussing informally with everyone just now about our plans and how things are at home and all those kind of things. So obviously setting up venues. Our biggest problem when we travel is finding venues. That's the biggest trouble we have. And then what we find is that most venues reject us. They don't want us there. So that requires us going through, like in Belgium, close to 100 venues just to find one. As you can imagine, that takes a long time, and we're doing it from Australia, so it's sort of hard to organise. And thanks very much to those people who were involved in that process, because that helps us a lot. Because imagine ringing them all from Australia, and then also you've got language barriers and difficulties like that, and so before you know it, it's so difficult to organise a venue. And then, once you tell them who you are, then of course they look at your website and then they think you're a cult, and then it's sort of...
Well, if they look at the website, it's a bit better. If they look at YouTube, that's bad.
That's usually bad. So generally they then say, no, we don't want you here. And then you're sort of left with only the higher priced venues who just are interested in the money to hire a venue. So that's a problem pretty much wherever we go. And this is one reason why we would eventually like to build our own venues, at least about 120 to 150 seat sort of venues, at least in 4 continents. So one in Europe, one in Europe, one in North America would be great, because then, people can travel. We can go to that venue, and if it's set up, ready to go, we've got speakers in there, we don't have to hire speakers, we can just go there every year. Mary and I can spend a couple of months at each venue then, and so we could run events like every weekend for a couple of months, and you get lots and lots of, opportunities then to get to know people as well. And so that's what we're doing in Australia, and God's Way organisation is sort of managing that side of things. And Mary and I were directors of the God's Way organisation. We're the founding members, but we were directors of the God's Way organisation in Australia. But obviously when we're travelling, 6 months of the year we were away, so we needed people we could trust to run that organisation who were, solid with God, solid with their emotions, solid with God, solid with respectful authority, solid with, wanting to do things in harmony with love. And it's taken us nearly 5 years to find 3 people who we felt we could rely on for that task. And now we've got those 3 people. So that's Eloisa, Cornelius and Phoebe. Phoebe Bruce is the third person. And they are now the directors of that organisation, and they're looking after that while we're away. So now that frees us up to travel more. So that's always been our goal. But now, obviously, to set up the same kind of thing in each continent, we need 3 more people, at least in each continent, who have that level of desire for God and relationship with God and so forth. And that's going to take time to find. We know how difficult most people find progress, particularly at the beginning of progress. And every one of the people who are directors of the God's Way organisation in Australia have been listening for at least 15 years. And it's taken them the first 10 years before they actually started to make any real progress. And that's generally the case almost for every person who ever finds God's truth.
And when you say real progress, it's not that they weren't doing things in those first 10 years, but they were sort of stumbling around, realising, this isn't it, I've got it wrong here, or, really learning the principles.
And also giving up their addictions, right?
Yeah.
You can't really make much progress while you've got lots of addictions. So it took a lot of time to sort of set things up in Australia, which we knew it would do. And that's why we hadn't been travelling, and also because we just hadn't had the funds to travel. And also a lot of our funds went towards sorting out things in the God's Way organisation to try to sort of get that happening as well. But now that we feel confident in those directors in Australia, we feel that sort of frees us up to travel more. And so now our plans are to travel 4 to 5 months overseas. And this, of course, is all everything we do is dependent upon donations. You know, we don't have any money ourselves, so we spent all our money already. So we're really just reliant on donations for this to happen. But our plans are 4 to 5 months overseas, and then maybe 2 months travelling around Australia, and then maybe 5 to 6 months at home, working with the God's Way organisation at home. And so that's what Mary and I are hoping to do for the next, probably 5 years at least.
Yeah. Something will change from how we've done it this time is that
turn on the aircon.
Yeah, if we can do it again next year, what we'll probably do is just come to 1 or 2 locations in Europe and spend longer in those locations. So part of the reason I was so passionate about getting this tour happening is because over the last couple of years, just through the God's Way organisation, we have people coming regularly to the area to do work, humility and practice days, you know, where they do a physical activity, but there's a lot of feedback about whether or not they're doing it in harmony with God's way, and people have the opportunity to learn about humility and what that means in practice and what it means in practice to be truthful and to take loving action. And at the end of those days, often, or in the lunch breaks, Jesus and I would just be sitting with people and we'd be having these discussions. And over the course of a couple of years, I just saw how impactful that was for people in their own development, to have just a regular connection to truth, some gentle feedback, sometimes some firm feedback, but just people who stayed engaged in that process. I saw shifts in them, and I really wanted to be able to give that opportunity to people overseas. And so that's why I was very interested in this living room idea. Let's just sit in a living room and we'll create this intimate atmosphere. But as Jesus has pointed out, and as I'm literally seeing in practice, those things have to kind of evolve. You have to really seek the truth, and you have to get through some of the places where you're at intellectually and emotionally to generate that kind of sincerity to stay engaged. And only some people will take that opportunity. But the reason why we're doing so many stops on this tour is because I wanted to sort of give as many people in different locations the opportunity and try to have these more smaller events. But what we've talked about since is that it's much better that we just go to 1 or 2 locations and stay there longer. That way the people who do want to engage again and again have more opportunity. They just come to that place. Whereas, I feel like we're finishing today and we're just getting to know you guys, and next weekend it'll be new people, and so next year we'll probably just come to Portugal and come to England, but spend longer in each place, and hopefully those of you, it's near enough that you could make a journey for however long it suits you in those places. And the idea of doing it each year is that you do get that sort of chance to engage with truth and love more regularly than just, it's very difficult, I know, just watching on YouTube, you're with yourself, and if you're lucky you've got a partner or a friend or someone else who's also interested, but some of you I know don't have that, and so you're really trying to practice these principles of being truthful and loving and humble in an environment that's quite opposed to that.
And there's no one there to advise you on what it looks like in practice, is there?
That's right. You just making your own assessments, and very often you can go along for a long time thinking, no, this is what my problem is and this is what the issue is, and then you spend 5 minutes with Jesus and he's like, actually no, this other thing, and you're like, oh, years I've spent thinking it's that, so it's pretty precious having that opportunity, and even you get to meet each other, don't you? And you want to ask Pierre?
It's best that the mic stays up the back, that one. But
Yeah.
Do you plan to make God's Way kind of event, like practical work with
Well, that's our long-term
feedbacks?
desire.
We'd like
Yes,
to.
our long-term desire is to basically have what we have running in Australia the same in every continent of the world, actually, eventually. And the reason why we want to do that is because most people really struggle when it comes to seeing their attitudes in practice, and particularly needing to grow self-awareness. Self-awareness, you remember the reason why God put us here, really, is so that you can develop your will, so you understand the use of your will, and you understand what it means to be fully self-aware. And what we find is that the majority of people who listen to us are almost completely unaware of themselves. They're unaware of their injuries, because you've grown up with your injuries from birth, and you've encouraged your own injuries without really knowing that you have, and you've built and developed a person, it's really an alter ego. It's really it's not the person God designed you to be. It's the person society and yourself and a number of other factors are trying to design you into. And because most of you have done that in a manner that is very gradual and very progressively gradual, you don't really notice the turning points you've made in your own life in the past that have led you to the point you now are in. And you also don't really notice what injuries you actually finish up having. And by the time the person's in there, an adult, generally they've got thousands of sins accrued on their soul, and for the majority of them, they don't think they're sins. They think they're good. They think they are righteous. They think they're necessary. The interesting thing I find is the average person, when we talk to them and they ask questions about their sins, well, a lot of times they are the things you see. But there's this whole slew of your life that you don't see. And unless you become self-aware and have a stronger connection with God through the conscience, you will never see. The trouble with never seeing it is you arrive in the spirit world in the hells wondering why you're there. Because why am I here? So most people who arrive in the spirit world are shocked about why they're in a certain location.
Yeah, a lot of people can sort of see, this is a problem I have, but it's the things that you don't see that you think are completely normal that end up being the trickiest ones.
Yeah,
to
so
deal with.
The times you were violent in your life, or the times you were, attacking other people in their life. Most people can sort of, see reasonably that they probably shouldn't have done that, and there's probably something driving that. But when it comes to addictions that you think are so part of you, and a lot of people think their addictions are their personality, actually.
Yeah.
When it's like that, everything is it's so natural for you just to have your addictions, and not realising that those particular things are not a part of your nature at all. And there's hardly any self-awareness because you've never been taught to have self-awareness. You've never been taught to be self-reflective. The average person on earth has a very mediocre, small amount of self-awareness compared to the kind of self-awareness they're going to need, and eventually the kind of self-awareness you will have if you develop your relationship with God. And so you end up in this place where you're not really self-aware, you don't really know what's going on, you don't really know what's going on in your life, you don't really know why. You've got all these ideas and concepts that you think are pretty good. Most people sort of feel that after they've lived a bit of life, they sort of feel they got things together a bit, Some others, of course, are bit more humble than that, but it's pretty rare to find a humble person in the Western world. And so we're in this place of thinking where everything's fine. And the problem with that is that while we think everything's fine, we're not going to look at what isn't fine. We're going to think it's all fine.
So to answer your question, that's the opportunity in the God's Way activity days. A lot of people find
5 minutes.
Well, I thought that was completely reasonable.
Yeah.
And so our spirit friends kind of gave me this vision of how this could happen. And if we can establish sort of centres around the world, even if we just have land, but there needs to be people in those places that really have God's way in their heart. They sort of shared with me this vision of, Jesus and I could come and give talks like we give.
For a couple of months.
But also people from God's way could come, and concurrent with the talks, they hold days. So you could tomorrow go out and help start building the foundations for the auditorium that we need to. So we'd hire something in the interim and we'd give talks nearby, and then, everyone would have the chance, if you want to get out and do something, to help build this auditorium that we can in the future.
But with the focus not of building, but of actually
humility.
Practice. We call our days now humility in practice days, because obviously, as we said on the very first day, humility is the first thing you really need to develop, and unfortunately most people have no idea the depth of humility you're going to need. And so it's good to have some practical situations occurring where you can address lack of humility as it's happening, rather than. And
you can sort of
giving examples all the time, like we do as well. But it's far better in situation. There it is.
What I found is that you can listen and for years to talks and even attend talks and believe you're dedicated. You are doing it, or you are sincere.
Yeah.
But what has been so beneficial. It's these days and this moment when you are addressed in the moment where you are not sincere, you are in addiction, and that's without that, it's really, really, really difficult to become sincere.
It is.
I can talk for myself.
Yeah, and this is why celestial spirits come and help spirits in lower conditions, for the same reason, because they know that it's so hard to develop sincerity, so they help. The key is to have helpers, but it is all dependent upon a few people making those, like the hardest first steps of being the first people in a certain location to do it. And it's like I said, we've been teaching every single week for the last 15 years, and we found 3 who could be in that condition where we feel that they would be responsible enough, and they love God enough, and they are trustworthy enough, and they have the right sincere motivations enough to actually lead something while we're not there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, to me, that's
so we
a massive...
know it's a slow process, and so we don't expect it all happen overnight or anything like that. But it is something we want to have happen.
When you meet people, you have a feeling like there is a potential to these people.
Oh, there's so many with potential.
You all have potential.
You all have potential.
We often feel the potential in people, but we know it's their decisions. It's their decisions, and we're not going to influence their decisions.
Yeah, we're not a cult.
No.
We don't sit on your shoulder telling you what to do.
No. And kind of, telling you what you should do, or geeing you up
and
to do it.
And a lot of people have wanted us to do that, of course, but completely refused to do that. Yeah.
Can I say that Eloisa and Phoebe, who are 2 of the directors, when I shared with them that vision, they were jumping out of their skin. They so much want to come and do that. So to me...
So what they're working on now is another 3 people in Australia.
Who can hold the fort down while...
Who can hold the fort down while they travel around and try to help people. So that's one of the things that they're trying to do, is identify people who have that sincere who are actually receiving God's love and who are actually making changes in their life. And so that's one of the things they're trying to do now, is while we're away trying to do all that. We give them sort of basically where we spend a fair bit of time with them. On the average, we're spending probably 4 days a month mentoring them, as well as all the other things we do. So
we still do actually a great deal of work in God's way, helping with all of the systems and procedures and financial recording and information sharing and all of that stuff. But
we're pretty busy.
But it's great that they can sort of be the responsible people while we're away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm also running sort of with Cornelius a building sort of program where we can where we can choose a method of building that might work everywhere we go. It'll be a very simple, not none of this eco, high end stuff, that people get all this good feelings from. It's just going to be probably very basic buildings, probably out of concrete for the most part, just to get a place to meet. A place to meet is what we need first, and once we've got a place to meet, then you can go there and people can come. And once you've got a place where people can come, modern society is a bit weird, isn't it? Like in the first century, I used to just rock up at a town and, say I'm out in the field talking on Saturday, and, 500 people would turn up, Of course, most of them couldn't hear a word I was saying because they were too far away. And there was no sound system or anything, So what would happen is that, like, the 50 around me who could actually hear, they'd be going off and talking to other people what he said, and then come back. And, it was pretty complicated. And if there were like 3,000 people there, it was like, and a lot of times the different farmers or whatever, they'd get a bit sometimes because sometimes there was space, that they had fields and everything was trampling them down. And in the end, I had to try to control the love of the whole thing, to a degree, because I'm responsible for those kind of things. But it just turns out to be, if you think about that in the first century, people used to come. We used to just walk from town to town, and I used to have a group of people go in front, walking. They'd arrive about a day or two early, and they'd find out who's sincere and who wanted us to stay with them and all that kind of stuff. And then we would stay with them, and then we would talk to them, and before you knew it, you'd end up with 50 people in their living room, if you could call them living rooms, and people sticking their heads in the windows and doors and whatever. And then, sometimes somebody would come along and say, why don't we meet on my field or whatever, and we'd meet out there. And that's how it would happen. But in the world we live in now, everything requires a degree of planning. And the trouble with the degree of planning is, you got to be there at a certain time, and you can't make adjustments, and you can't do really things on the fly very easily, which is something Mary and I would like to do in the future.
Yeah.
So having a place we can go to on the fly means that we can just go, oh yeah, let's go tomorrow to Portugal, and we'll stay there for a month, and we'll just tell everybody we're there. And whoever rocks up, we just say we're going to have these kind of meetings on these days, and whoever rocks up, that kind of thing. So it's a bit more fluid then, a bit more. And it also means we're not spending... See, at the moment, when we do a trip like this, in terms of Australian dollars, we're spending more than 100,000 Australian dollars on every trip we do. Because of accommodation and venues. Venues hit us badly, generally. Basically, it's any venue bigger than this, 100 or more, generally in Europe and America, you're talking $10,000 a day.
If it's
if we have found a venue in America, but it took us a long time to find it. It's in a motel where we could hit 120 people, and that's costing us $3,000 for 2 days, 3,000 US for 2 days. So that's like 6,000 Australian dollars almost for us. That's pretty good, actually. But if you add that 14 times, 6,000 by 14 times, if you do 14 venues, you can see straight away
much better.
You're up to $90,000, right, just for the venues. And then, so having a venue we can go to regularly means we don't have to reset up sound, reset up chairs and all those other things, but also it means that you're not paying out that cost. So what happens then is for myself and Mary to travel, it's just flights. Mm-hmm. Go there, stay at the venue. So, if we build venues that have got like a bedroom on them or whatever, kitchen and a bedroom, then we can even stay at the venue. And we don't need to then pay these constant, if you look over the next 5 years, we'll spend at least 500 to 1,000 Australian dollars just to travel. And that's donations, but, we don't have that money, but it's also donations that could go towards venues.
Yeah, it just requires enough people sort of having that collective vision in their hearts that then, donations could go towards something that's more lasting.
Yeah. Rather than just be wasted on, venues that eventually we won't be using anyway, probably. In the end, I sort of expect as time goes on, and I don't know what's going to happen because nobody's ever tried to do what we're now trying to do. So, but, we might end up in venues like $50,000 soccer venues or whatever. But that's very impersonal, and you can really only share theories about truth in those kind of venues. You can really only do like seminars or present information in those kind of venues. There's not a lot you can do to connect to people on a more personal level. And so the key thing is that we just need a lot more people who are well developed emotionally, have a good connection with God, who can be involved in the sharing of divine truth worldwide. Yeah, and of course it requires some bravery to do that.
It does.
Yeah.
Hannah, there.
Just,
Thanks. So earlier, a few minutes ago, when you were speaking about the inspiration, Mary, that you had, a couple of times you started to say "to me," and then you got interrupted. And it stayed with me, and I'm really curious about what you would have said.
Oh gosh!
And this is not this has happened to me many times. Also watching videos.
Yes.
When Mary starts to speak, but then she gets interrupted, and sometimes I really have the desire to hear her as well. I needed to say this because this is really something.
There's a lot of emotion in that comment.
There is. Look. Let's just talk about this in general because it's good. It's good. A lot of people have this issue. When I met Jesus, I had a lot of... it's funny because I'm actually quite fearful still, public speaking, but I had a lot of feelings about men dominating women, and I wanted to be his equal. I was actually in a lot of competition with him. I felt so useless. I wanted to prove I had something to say all the time, especially in videos and stuff. And so I would often be in quite a lot of addiction when I was going to speak. And Jesus doesn't really tolerate addiction very much. And so often he would cut me off midway.
As soon as I know Mary's in addiction, I'll cut her off.
Yeah. And
I'm responsible for love in this situation.
Yeah, and so the truth needs to be said.
Not going to tolerate her in addiction, as well as I don't tolerate you in it.
Yeah.
Or myself in it, by the way.
Yeah. But I do understand that triggers a lot of feelings for women because they feel like Mary never gets to have her say.
Trust me, Mary gets to have her say.
I certainly get to have my say. In private, I get to have my say quite a lot. Blue ears, I think Jesus said once he had. And I think that has shifted a lot in recent times as there's less addiction in me about the issue.
Well, you've been working on your addictions in a public setting, haven't you?
I have, because we don't need to go into all of my personal emotions, but in a personal setting, there used to be quite a lot of emotion triggered for me, and I would get anxious and shut down and
maybe if we can just illustrate
influenced.
a few of those emotions so people get a perception, particularly one where when the group gets worried.
Yes. So there's probably three main things I can think of. One was I would often sit there and feel like I'm so ashamed of my condition and I'm so useless, I'm so behind Jesus in terms of love and I'm not developed and I don't want to feel that, so I want to prove that I have something to say and sort of icky, but true. And so that was often one of the addictions. Another addiction is that I am very emotionally sensitive and sensitive to spirits. And often I would feel when people were starting to get really worried or challenged by what Jesus was saying. And if you watch some of the assistance group videos, it is so clear. I would chip in with a joke at those times, or lighten the mood, or just explain it a different way, or try to lessen the impact things were having on the audience, which is another addiction I had. And now the third one, probably dominant one that I can think of, is say Jesus is interacting with one of you, and Jesus is very clear that he wants to give context to every answer that he has so that it benefits everyone. But I would often feel, no, this person just wants to hear about this thing. And so because I was very hooked into pleasing people, I would then try to direct Jesus, like, just get to the point. You know, they just want to hear about this. And he'd be like, hang on, I've got to explain this whole other thing. And so...
See, I'm very conscious that you're not the only persons that are going to hear this discussion.
Yeah.
I'm very conscious that many of you will share it. Many of you, it may go online, who knows, we don't know. Many of you will just record it on your mobile phones and then share it, and who knows where that might go. Mm-hmm. And so it's very important that we try to give as much complete information as possible about certain subjects.
And in addition, often you can feel the person thinks they get it. They think they know what you're saying. And I've witnessed this
and
too now.
Many times Mary thinks she knows, by the way, too.
Yeah. But actually, so there's this sort of desire, like, oh, yes, I've watched the videos, I know what you're saying. But often Jesus is really presenting the answer that you are resisting emotionally. And so he's like, no, this is what they need to understand. They think they get it, but they don't. So a lot of those times you would see Jesus cut me off, but now I would say that I'm just as guilty of cutting him off, especially in like relaxed company, because we both get so passionate about the thing that we're saying, and we sort of cut each other off, which is maybe something we need to work on, but I don't know.
It doesn't matter much to us. We're one person.
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter much to us about who says what. And so, if I feel that what Mary's explaining to you is not in harmony with God's truth on the matter, then it's important that I stop her. And there's a number of ways in the past that I tried to stop her, like tap her on the thing or tap her on it, just to get her to pause. But Mary just
in my addiction. Baby, there was no stopping me.
You don't understand the 14 yet. One day when you meet most of them, you'll see they have very strong, powerful wills, and that nobody's stopping them from doing nothing. So
whether it's addiction or good thing, they're pretty dedicated.
So what has happened in the past is I have attempted to, in an unembarrassing way, stop Mary from going down certain tracks which I can see are either addiction or not the full harmony with truth, or feeding the fears of the audience. This is something that she's been guilty of doing in the past a lot, where I will say something, the audience gets triggered into fear, and instead of I just leave it with you. It's sort of like, too bad, you're afraid now. Well, it's an ant-emotion, get over it. And Mary's going, but it's a big emotion.
Yeah, it's fear like commiseration. I used to
Mary
do
had
a lot.
Of commiseration for fear.
Yeah.
And basically that's something you've only been working on the last couple of years, really, isn't it? Stopping commiseration for fear.
Yeah.
And
because I wanted it for my own fear before then. Yeah.
And so also what happens a lot in these discussions is people tell stories, and Mary likes people telling stories. And I'm going, I don't want to hear your story. I already know it.
Yeah.
Now, Mary doesn't know it. I understand that, because she hasn't developed that side of our soul yet where she can feel the story before you start speaking. But I have. I don't need to know your story. I need to say the truth to you about it. I can feel your story already. In fact, for most people, telling their story is actually their addiction. Does that make sense to you? Like you often, when you meet people, you tell the story, and if somebody listens to you, you go, oh, they're a lovely person. They listened to my story. And I'm going, well, actually, if they were emotionally sensitive, they would feel your story the moment they met you. So they'd already know your story, right? So when many of you come up and start speaking with us, I can feel your story. Not just your story you're talking about at the moment, but also the story of your life, the story of your history and where these feelings have come from and all these kind of things. Now, Mary can't do that quite yet.
I can do it in some cases, but
as long as she's not afraid.
Yeah.
And oftentimes...
And I would say that's only just developing really in me anyway.
That's right.
Yeah.
So when people want to tell their stories, I want to stop you, right? And you'll notice me doing this more and more, actually. And the reason why is when a person tells a story in a group of 100 people, they are being selfish. They are not acting in harmony with love. The only point of telling your story in front of 100 people is if 50 or more of those people actually have the same story. Because then 50 or more people, a group of people can hear the story and learn from it. But if you're just one person telling a story and it's quite unique, and sometimes they are, all you're doing is feeding your own addiction, and you're forcing everybody in the group to listen to that addiction. And many of you know, as this happens, you can feel in you, can she just move on? Or can he just move on with that? You start feeling that, right? You can start feeling, what's this person raving on about? And it's not conducive to the sharing of truth either, because once a person is in their story, they're not humble anymore. They're not being humble anymore. They are actually not wanting to know the truth. They are wanting to share their truth, which is not the same thing, right? And your truth is not God's. You've got to remember that too. Mm. So there's many, many reasons why we might interrupt you. But besides the fact that we both get enthusiastic and...
Yes.
And also for us, like if Mary's talking to somebody, I don't feel I need to talk to them. So it's funny when people say to Mary, they're talking to Mary about a subject, and then they say, can you arrange to talk to Jesus about it? Which is something that happens quite a lot, mind you. And I'm going, why? You talk to Mary about it. She's the other half of my soul. We're the same person. Why do you need to talk to me as well as Mary about something? It is a misunderstanding of who we are in that regard, I feel.
Mm. And I do just encourage you when you watch those videos and Jesus cuts me off to feel what it brings up for you, because, there's a lot of intergender issues on the planet, and if you could feel Jesus' feelings for me, he's very respectful, and really if you want to talk, you kind of want to empower me as a woman. I, in my fear, have almost just sort of wanted him to alleviate my fears and not really for me to have a proper voice, if that makes sense. I wanted to prove myself, but not really have a proper voice. And so, I just encourage you to feel your feelings about it, because obviously, women have a lot of issues there. And
you do have a lot of anti-men sentiment, by the way.
Yeah, Hannah, yourself, yeah.
And yourself. Sorry.
Yeah. And I do understand that a lot of women find it a bit frustrating because I don't know if I understand that, but, they'd like me to have the development of Jesus, and I'm still reaching that because they'd like to hear all this from a woman, because hearing it from a man is a bit like, I don't know if I want to listen to this guy because, I've got all my issues with my dad and my past and stuff. But, I'm going to get there. I'm just on my journey, and you're really helping me with that. So
yeah, and I don't have any control over Mary's development. I don't have any control over Mary's life in any way at all. So how rapidly she develops is up to Mary. Now, Mary, in the past 15 years, has been quite resistive to developing for lots of reasons. And one of the main reasons has been she's terrified of violence. From the amount of violence that I get is quite high from people. And I've had many threats to my life and so forth already. And Mary gets quite scared of all of that. And so she's trying to calm everybody down all the time. Mm. And I don't, as you know, care really much about calming you down.
Well, and when you say you don't care, it's more that, and this is what I'm finding in myself, you just have more faith that people can feel their feelings. You can get through your fear.
You can feel your tough emotions without being violent.
Yeah.
You can feel your tough emotions without acting badly. Mm. So I don't worry too much about that. And I also feel quite protected you know, in the sense of, you know, I know God wants me to share God's truth. Our spirit friends are trying to give me as much protection as possible. And I know that if I stay in harmony with truth myself, I am afforded the most protection that I could possibly be afforded. I'm working in harmony with the law. Frequently what would happen in our discussions is I will be on a subject and Mary will try to move that subject to a different subject. And I'm trying to get back the subject because I'm not finished with that subject yet. So it has been a lot easier for me to teach without Mary being present under those circumstances than it is when Mary is there, because quite often she feels challenged about the subject and then she wants me to move on from that subject. And I'm going, but I'm not finished yet.
Yeah.
Like we need to, there's things we need to say, there's truths we need to share, and we need to give complete information. So there's many times where I would just say, no, let's stop there. I need to get back on this subject. But I don't say it to Mary, I just interrupt her.
Yeah. And a lot of the discussions about this happen in private too. You know?
Yeah.
But I've been quite arrogant. Like I have many regrets actually about the ways that I've behaved on camera many times. But I'm just being kind to myself about that as well and saying, well, that was a part of where I was at. But But
it's also interesting, isn't it, that most women think it was okay.
Yes. That the way
and
that
even
I
most
was,
men
yeah,
think it was okay.
yeah, yeah.
It's only when we discuss it in private and I say, no, here's God's truth about what you're doing. Here's you know, and let's talk to God about what He feels about what you're doing, to the truth, because like if I share some truth with you and you're all triggered into fear, if Mary allays that fear, she's now undone the work I just did.
Yeah.
Completely undone. And if Mary says something to you, and there are times when she does mediumship or says something to you and you're all triggered, if I then said some things to alleviate your fears, then I'll be undoing the truth, which is something I never want to do. So, and also, I started this process of sharing truth way before Mary did. It makes sense? And so in a lot of ways, Mary has joined me, and there's been a whole heap of things that we've had to work out ourselves about how that is going to happen if she's going to want... So there's a period of time when she wanted to join me, but she wanted to do it out of harmony with God's way. And so we had to work through all of that as to why you want to do it out of harmony with God's way. What's the emotional reasons? Can you see them? You know, because and also instead of just banning Mary from coming until she sorted that out, she came every time, and then afterwards we'd have to have another talk, you know, and another talk and another talk, and it just depended on how open Mary was to making any changes as to how long it took to change that thing. Yeah. And I've had the one advantage that I've had is that I've had a head start on Mary. I found out, I remembered the process of progress when I was 33 years of age, and I met Mary when I was 45. So I had a 12-year head start, and I did all of that work, the majority of it in private, like when nobody was listening to me. Now, Mary, unfortunately, or in some cases, has had the disadvantage of doing it in public.
Sort of being thrust into
public
light, attention,
where everybody's looking at her and looking at us and looking at, and she hasn't had any, and she's had, and this is one of the emotions Mary's had to work through. She hasn't had any real space to work through her rage about who she is and her anger about what I've been doing and that I'd already been doing it before she met me and a lot of other issues.
I had a lot of those feelings, didn't I? Of like, this is so humiliating. You know, here I am.
And she's working through that in public.
Yeah.
Which is actually a very humble thing to do. Brave. Yeah. And most of you have no idea how humble she is. How much focus on truth she has and how brave she is. right? And like at times I feel a bit upset about that, but there's nothing I can do about your perception, and I don't really want to change it. I'm just saying that Mary has had to go through a different process of coming to terms with who she is than I've had to go through. Because I had 12 years where I could work it all out myself to a large degree without any public scrutiny or interference, to a degree. The last 5 years of it, there was a lot more public. But up until then, a lot of it, a good solid 7 or 8 years of it was complete, or more than that, 9 years of it was private, pretty much. And so that's, in a lot of ways, I've had that advantage of doing that Mary hasn't had. And it's been tricky for Mary to come to terms with that. And there's nothing, I can't save her from those feelings, but they are feelings that Mary needs to go through. And by the way, when the rest of the 14s, if they ever choose to do what we're doing, they're going to find it's all in public too, because I've already started the ball rolling, and unfortunately for them, they're going to. And this is why Mary needs to go through it first, because she will be best equipped to help the rest of the 14 go through similar emotions. I won't be, because I did it all privately, right? Mary will know the feelings better than I do when it comes to that. And also, you could say your family life has removed you from a connection with God much more strongly than my family life removed me from a connection with God.
Absolutely, yeah.
So there's also that she's facing at the same time, and she's doing it all in public. So the advantage of that for you is you get to see her progress. So there's advantage there, but of course for Mary it doesn't feel very good.
Well, I think
that everybody's very scrutinising and quite often critical and. And by the way, there have been people who are much more critical of me through this process than they have been of Mary, because they think that I handle Mary roughly.
Yes.
And as Mary well knows, nothing could be further from the truth. So, it's been quite tricky because quite often I get abusive emails from women who are supporting Mary, feeling that they need to support Mary against myself.
In the past, yeah.
So I find even that very interesting, because they have no idea of what our life is like in private, because Mary definitely gets to have her say all the time. And in fact, if we look honestly at our last, the time we've been together, I've probably listened to you 95% of the time. And Mary's listened to me 5% of the time.
Again, something that
which is
being
changing.
worked on.
No, it's changing.
But
when we first met, Mary's ultimate goal was to convince me that I was an idiot.
Yeah.
And that while she felt attracted to me and everything else, and while this divine truth stuff was very interesting, I'm definitely not Jesus. And she's definitely not Mary Magdalene, even though she felt she was. She's trying to convince me and her that she's not. Yeah. And so even all that process has been very difficult in the sense, from my perspective, because I've had to go, at some point I've got to go, my relationship with God, if Mary and I are going to progress as a unit, as a soul, my relationship with God is going to have to be more important than my relationship with Mary. Because if my relationship with Mary was more important, I would have sacrificed God's principles for Mary's feelings. Does that make sense to you?
And that was hard for you too,
It was
wasn't
hard,
it?
because I wanted to.
You wanted me in your life so much, and it was quite...
And I wanted to sacrifice. Even myself for Mary, for the sake of Mary's feelings. But after I realised, actually, if I do that, we both won't progress.
And it's just the biggest gift to me that you never did that. It's such a gift to me.
Yeah. And in doing that, it's made us closer, stronger, it's also made Mary more motivated and self enabled, I suppose.
Yeah.
Is probably the
Yeah,
best way.
exactly.
Because instead of me saying to Mary, you've got to make these changes, I'm saying, here's God's principles. You're allowed to do whatever you like, right? But I'm doing this.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm going to live this way. I'm going to live this life the way God wants me to. And if you are going to be opposing me living the life, because at the beginning of our relationship, Mary was probably my main opposer. If you
wanted addiction, I want worldly sort of
approval
comfort and
comfort.
approval. Not like I didn't want popularity.
No.
I didn't want exposure.
Didn't want any public
I just
exposure.
want
Mary
quiet
wanted me to not
acceptance.
talk to any person publicly.
Yeah.
She wanted to have no seminars, no presentations, no travel, no any of those.
But then I get there, like, yeah, I love all you guys. So it's I get so excited about God's truth.
When you start connecting to your feelings for people, then you feel differently, isn't it? But
well, and now I feel like I was kind of like, hey, Jesus, let's go around the world.
Mary's
Let's
the
do
one
it.
who organised. She organised this trip,
Yeah,
and I just sort of. I didn't
You
sit
did a
back.
lot.
I did for a bit, but it was more like I let Mary organise things the way she wanted to organise them, and eventually in the process,
I learnt a lot.
you learnt a lot, didn't you, as
I
to
did.
how to organise the trip?
Yeah.
But we did that on purpose as well, because it's one thing me saying to Mary, "Look, Mary, this living room thing's not going to work," but it's another thing for her to go through the experiencing of the organising of it and realise it's not going to work.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Without my
Yeah.
influence.
Yeah.
And so that's what we do. We let each other come to our own conclusions. As we progress towards God, eventually our own conclusions will disappear and we'll have more and more conclusions that are in harmony with God's. And if there is an inequality in terms of our progress, well, obviously one of us has got to rely on the other of us, that the person who's closer to God is going to know God's opinions more. And that also is something that needs to be listened to. Now, Mary didn't want to listen to that for the first probably, well, even up until 2019.
Jay, it's been a long
Yeah,
time.
it's been a while.
Yeah, I
Probably the
really
first
have
solid 10
come
years.
kicking and screaming to God, really.
Yeah.
I've fought it a lot and I've had big tantrums and like I talked about with you guys yesterday, lots of demands, lots of expectations. I shouldn't have to feel this way. I shouldn't have to do things God's way. It's a special case for me. Like a lot of things that I see in a lot of you guys, at various times, I've done it. I've been there.
And in that regard, Mary sort of understands your emotions sometimes better than I do, because I'm not a kicker and screamer.
Yeah, Jesus has this beautiful heart where it's like, well, if it's right, that's it.
It's right. It's too
But
bad. I've got to just do it.
I'll deal with whatever comes up. And I had more of a feeling, well, it's right, but it's not fair, or it's right, but I can't do it, or it's right, but
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So for me, the righteous view of your own rightness, that most people seem to have, I don't have that at all. God's the person who's right, and my responsibility is to find out what that is. And that's it. And so when somebody shares, when God shares a truth with me, it's almost instant that I absorb it and take it on as true.
And act on it.
And act upon it. For all of the others of the 14, they haven't had that experience on earth that I had in the first century. So I have, in some ways, some sort of advantage. That's how I engaged my first century life. Whenever God shared something with me, I said, right, that's it. That's what I feel. I've got to go through the feelings, and that's what I'm going to do. And there are plenty of times when I was quite concerned. I knew I was going to die. I knew I was worried about, because I knew also that I'd meet Mary in the first century. I knew I'd meet her. But I also knew I was going to die. So how was that going to be? Like, you know, I'd meet her and then a few years later I'm going to die. How is she going to feel about that? So those kind of things concerned me. But at the end of the day, I have learnt that if you do things God's way, things work out for the best for your whole soul.
Yeah.
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 Of which I am only one half. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So our relationship is improving well now, but there's been times where you've left and gone and 3 months at a time. I think Mary's probably left 10 times at least in the time I've known her.
Yeah.
For different reasons. Sometimes supposedly to deal with some feelings that you never dealt with, wasn't it? And then and then other times
running away is what it was.
Yeah, running away.
Yeah. All the time, really. Yeah.
And each time I just say, well, if...
This is, I suppose, probably something that people don't know about you either, is that Jesus is very respectful of my free will. If I don't want to be there, no matter how he feels about it, he's not going to impose anything on me about that. And we're just doing our thing. We're working through our injuries, aren't we? We've had injuries with the opposite gender as well that have all been exposed in this process.
Yeah,
Both of us.
My primary one was bending over backwards for the woman in order and sacrificing God's principles in the process.
Yeah.
And Mary, being the way she has been, has sorted me out in that regard, because I've had to become quite firm, not unlovingly so, but just quite firm. No, I am sticking to these principles no matter what Mary wants me to do, and even if she hates me for it, I'm sticking to it.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I have had just so many issues with men.
But you respect that, don't you?
I do, very much. Yeah. I very much respect Jesus.
Because what I found initially is I was trying to conform, and the more I conformed, the more Mary disrespected me. So it's to my own detriment as well as to the detriment of God's truth.
When we met, and I'm sure it's the same for most of you, when you start this process, you really want a partner who's just going to make your fears and sadness go away. You know, it's not really anything about them. And meeting Jesus has been like he you know, obviously we've known each other before, but it's very impressive to meet someone who doesn't bend to that codependence, and then I get to see the real qualities in him. So not just his personality, but the qualities he's developed, like the character to really stick to something when it's hard, to face attack even if you're going to feel something, to stick to principles because they are good and right, you know, and that's the reason why you do it, not because you're going to get something out of it. Like, these are points of his character that are very attractive to me, you know, as well as, you know, your personality. But I didn't want that initially. I didn't have respect for that. I wasn't looking for a man with character. I was looking for a man who would, you know, meet my addictions. And that was our argument, really, wasn't it?
Yeah, and it was a 10-year argument.
Yep. Took time. I was stubborn. Very stubborn person.
And we would sit down and talk for hours and hours, sometimes whole days without sleeping, about God's principles versus your personal feelings.
Yeah.
About, are you going to adhere to God's principles, or are we just going to engage our own personal feelings, honour those, and then mess up everything with regard to God's principles?
Yeah, and this is where the lesson of humility is so important. You know, what we were talking about yesterday, the mind versus the feeling state. It wasn't until I was willing to feel some things that this is why it took 10 years. You know, I didn't want to feel really what was involved, especially about identity. You know, I think that's a big stumbling block for all the 14. But, you know, until
it's
I was...
It's about stuff that you guys don't have to worry about.
No. But the principle
of... remembering first century experiences, remembering spirit experiences, and the identity. All the 14 have huge amounts of terror and rage about that. And I had some rage, very little. I got through it in about 3 months. Had a fair bit of terror. It took me more like 5 years to deal with the terror about it. But all the rest of the 14 haven't dealt with it. Not to this day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the principle of things changing in your relationship is the same. You know, you need to be humble about things rather than just discuss them. You know, I was willing to discuss things till the cows came home.
Well, it's like Mary would explain to me all the reasons why I was wrong, and I would listen to the whole thing generally. And then after a while I go, you know, all I needed to do is go, but here's God's principle, babe. And she goes, jeez. You know, like, you know, so I listened to her for 3 hours about her reasons of why she's doing what she's doing. And then, but I say then I have my 5 minutes of saying, but here's God's principle, right, of truth and love. And Mary just goes, and like, you'll see with Mary that she just goes, yeah, I can't deny that. It's sort of like, and so after a while we learnt that listening for the 3 hours
in the hopes that I might
in the hope that she might work it out
to
herself was really wasting both of our time. And so I would let her go for 15 minutes instead of 3 hours, and then I say, babe, do you really want to just know the truth, or you're just going to tell me the story?
Well,
you know?
one of the things about fear and when we've been overlooked as a child or we're very afraid is we want to say it all. You know, we want to get it all out and we want to be heard by the other person and we want to...
Can I say, though, when you do that, you're not feeling it.
That's right. It's the addiction to avoid the fear or addiction to avoid the sadness that causes that. Yeah. And, I've been pretty vocal in that.
So the desire to say everything to somebody means that you're not actually feeling it. And when you feel it, it almost becomes unnecessary to say anything to anybody.
Yeah.
Right? And this is why most of you don't know what I've been through, because I've never really explained it except from a teaching perspective. That's the only time I do now. I don't sort of sit there and get a whole heap of you to commiserate with my feelings about things. And that's what Mary wanted to do at the beginning as well.
Very much,
because she wanted justification for being in a rage about who she is.
Yeah.
Right? And I was saying to Mary during those days, I said, but darling, this is not loving to do that. It's not loving to involve large groups of people in your process. You know, the loving thing to do is to be humble and have your process rather than involve...
I've got a lot of regrets about that too.
Yeah.
Involving other people.
Yeah. And the trouble with involving other people is other people then all want to have a say. And then, of course, that muddies your waters in terms of you having your process. And that's something that's worth knowing, because the more public you make your process, and I mean sharing it with family and friends and, you know, and of course for us it's like, even more public because, you know, we're in front of people all the time. But the more public you make your process, the more they're going to want to interfere with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You follow?
Yeah.
And this is why a lot of people go, oh, you're feeling too much emotion now. Let's take you to the doctor. You know, all that kind of stuff. You seem to me to be very depressed. Can we, you know, like there have been times when I've been crying for like 3 months straight. If people knew about it, they would have certified me, right? Because they're terrified of someone crying for 3 months straight, right? But I've got the confidence that if I need to cry for 3 months straight to get to the bottom of an issue, I can do it, and I'll resolve it. And the rest of the 14 yet don't have that full confidence. So don't have that full confidence in God's way. They are in a process. Mary's the closest of all the rest of the 14 to having that breakthrough. And Mary will be the next person who has those breakthroughs. On earth, she'll be the next person. And then after that, hopefully we can help some of the others and some of you to have the same breakthroughs. But that's probably how it's going to work out.
Yeah. Yeah. But I'm sorry, I can't remember what I was going to say, but I think that I said it all, you know. I think that I didn't feel there was anything left. what you notice now is that I'm just more respectful of like that we can take turns speaking now. And so if I feel something's left over, like yesterday, a few times where I feel like, no, this hasn't been covered, I'm going to say this. I just wait till he's finished though, rather than trying to interject. And a lot of the old things I'd interject before you got to your point. Yeah. Yep.
Yes. Thank you. You talked about the personality traits of Jesus. I was wondering, what are the personality traits? Because I was thinking, two souls who are in the same state of love. What are differing these two souls? What is personality? I don't know how to explain that, but...
You mean what is personality aside from the loving expression? Or?
Yes.
Because this is a really common idea that people have that, when you just get to be loving, everyone's going to behave the same. If everyone's in the same state of love, everyone will just be... And it's not true. It's actually more different because people are...
Individual.
They're their individual self, but they're less trying to conform and they're less in addiction. And so they're more like... Jesus is quite a playful person and he's quite... Well, I guess we both are, you know. Yeah. And kind of...
We have the same nature and personality. And sometimes Mary's more afraid of expressing it than I am. Yeah. But
there's some
particularly
areas...
in public, in private, Mary's probably more, sometimes even more expressive than I am in private.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
And we both have a sort of a sense of humour. We quite like to joke around. A little warped
sense of humour.
Yes. But I suppose it's difficult to describe a personality, because it's really a feeling. It's not a set of actions, if that makes sense, or a set of interests. It's more a feeling of a person. So there's a very... I'm just, like steady, solid sort of, not steady is a wrong word. It's very hard, to describe I think you have to feel him. You're going to have to feel him,
At this stage, not many people on earth can feel me. So
most people are afraid of Jesus.
Most people are afraid of me, yeah.
They see him as the all-seeing, all-knowing of their soul condition and they get worried. Even people who don't know who he is kind of feel like,
it's really strange when I meet new people.
Women
have always reacted really badly to me, actually, because they sort of feel.
Well, you don't sexually project,
no,
and a lot of.
So I don't trade in sexual projection.
A lot of women feel more secure in that.
Yeah. So most women like a bit of sexual projection because then they know they've got a bit of traction.
Or that they're liked. Sometimes it's just
and they need approval or whatever.
Yeah.
So a lot of times women are instantly angry because I don't do that. Then, of course, I hold on to a principle even if...
Someone's afraid.
Someone's afraid.
Yeah.
Most women want a man to recognise they're afraid and to stop making them afraid. Does that make sense?
Exactly what I went through.
Yeah. And so a lot of women have been pretty upset with me about I'll keep on a subject if the person allows me. I won't force the subject, but I'll keep on the subject if the person wants to continue talking about it, but I'm not worried about whether they're afraid about the subject or not. So for many women, that's like a big turn-off. Because for most women, they would like to have the man provide them some sense of security, right? And of course, many men are addicted to the illusion of providing that security as well. So many men think, I'll be the man, I'll save you from, whatever it is, financial ruin or whatever.
That's how they feel
other
worse.
Reason, and many women also feel that a man is sort of essential with regard to having children in the sense of bringing up the children and so forth, and needing to have a partner who, to some extent, they have control of. And Mary knows right from the beginning she's had no control of me. And she tempted to have control, and I was very gentle the way I responded to her attempts of control, but I was still very firm. So that really annoyed her because she thought, if I'm gentle, then she should be able to get control over me. So she tried harder. And And so what I notice is a lot of women also feel they want some level of control over men because of their fear. And so historically, very few women have liked me very much. And even a lot of the women who listen to Divine Truth only listen because of Mary.
Do you think that?
Yeah, well, women have said that to you, haven't they?
Yeah, well, they've said if you weren't here, I couldn't listen.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they wouldn't trust Jesus.
Yeah.
You know, because especially the women who are around us very, like, more regularly, they can feel how, what's the right word? They can feel how devoted, I suppose, Jesus is to me. Like, they get to observe that and they feel his feelings about that, and they've witnessed it, I suppose, as well. And so they feel like, well, there's some character there in you, and also that you, I don't know, that you like me, and so therefore maybe, yeah. I don't know why. You have to ask them. Yeah. But personality, when it's lovingly expressed, you know, people have different affinities for different things. Like, some people are really engineers, and they find joy in that and expression in that, and they do that a lot. Other people are very musical. Other people are very gentle in their expression. Other people are very boisterous, you know. So that's all part of personality that, when it's lovingly expressed, it actually becomes more it's kind of in your face, if you like, more noticeable. Yeah. But I think it's a very common perception on earth that if we all become loving, we're all just going to be sort of acting the same way. And I think, and maybe this might be the thing that I was going to talk about before. I think it is. The benefit of us all becoming humble is it opens the doorway to truth and love, you know. And when people, each person with their unique personality, really wants truth and love, there becomes this potential to work together harmoniously and very productively, because each person brings their unique kind of talent or flavour to the project, but there's harmony in the way that it's being carried out. And that's why I love the humility and practice days in God's way. We're not yet harmonious, people are not yet working together, but there's that potential, you know, that as people become more humble and want more love and truth, we can actually do big things together, and quite diverse things, because people will want their own nature. Yeah.
And you'll become more expressive of your personality and nature as you grow in love, but you'll also become more individual.
Yeah.
So So at the moment, most of us have learnt in a society, we grow up in a society, we learn there are certain types of things that I might have a tendency to do because of my personality that are not really good, you know. So one of those things is, you know, just to be flamboyant, not really good. In some societies, that's good. So you go to America and flamboyance is sort of almost like accepted, but you go to Australia and flamboyance is like, what are you doing, man?
You've got tickets on yourself,
yeah,
mate.
You know,
calm it down.
That kind of thing. And so every society has its own rules and structures about how you should express your personality. And as you grow towards God, God wants you to be the person he created you to be. In fact, one of his primary intents is intent in terms of I-N-T-E-N-T. One of his intents is to make sure that you understand who you are and how to express your personality and nature in the best possible manner. That is one of the things he wants to share with you. And actually meeting the other half of you is really interesting, because they are also going to be expressing, like in Mary's case, the feminine side of my personality, and I'm going to express the masculine side of her personality. Does that make sense? And eventually you start, the more you get closer and closer together, the more you work sort of in tandem in that regard, and you sort of become one person in two bodies, expressing yourself and with the same personality, expressing yourself. And that's God's goal for your soul. Remember, you're only one half of it. So you want you becoming your person, your personality, your nature. And then the thing you need to refine in order to do that is your character. Your character is something that you change, you refine, it becomes more loving. But your personality and nature, God designed you with it, but you've got to discover it. And then you've got to be it. and you've got to have the courage to be it in the world. You've got to get beyond the point of worrying about what all those people out there think. You know, stand up, turn around. Stand up, turn around. Yeah, just as an illustration, right? Stand up, turn around. Look, see all those people looking at you. They're all judging you some way or other, criticising you some way or other. They don't even know they're doing it half the time, right? And yet you need to learn to be you no matter what they think, no matter what they feel.
And love you.
And
being it.
You love you being you, whether they love you being you or not. Does that make sense? Now, sorry about that. It was embarrassing, I know, but but it's sort of like in doing that, you think you would be then comfortable talking to 1,000 people, wouldn't you, about what you love? You know, let's say you love, you know, you have a passion. Like, let's say you were interested in biological truth. And let's say you started examining the biological world around you and you saw all this God's truth in this biology. And let's say you now had the opportunity to share that with 1,000 scientists. You wouldn't be going, oh, I'm too shy to do that. Your personality is going, bursting to do it. Like, I'm doing that because this is like important stuff.
And exciting.
And I'm excited by it and I want to do it. That's a part of your personality, you see. And so it's very important to connect to that personality, and God can share a lot with you about your personality. And it's very important to connect to that personality and then be it no matter what anybody thinks. Now, when you do that, the irony is whoever is your soulmate, they're going to go, wow, that person happens to be the best person on earth for me. You know what I mean? That they're going to see it. You see what I'm saying?
And even if they don't love it immediately.
And even if they don't love it, like when I first met Mary, she's going, I don't know about this guy.
Well,
I'll try and convince him to not do the thing he's passionate about. but she still wanted to be with me.
Yeah. Very sadly on earth, many of us are kind of taught in our childhood to hate our personality, you know, and that was my experience in this life, you know, that my personality was somehow offensive and too much for the people around me. Even my affinity for truth is something my mother, when I last spoke to her, which is a long time
and
ago.
Dad, hey, Mum and Dad,
they're were always just, you and truth, you know. It was such a trauma having you as a kid almost. There's the feeling, you know, like you wouldn't let it go, and every time we lied to you, you'd point it out, and, you know, so sadly, I reached a point in my late 20s where I really was trying to be anyone but myself, and I really felt a lot of shame and that it was going to hurt everyone if I'd be myself and stuff. So when I met Jesus, he was really more developed in love and really focused on being our personality.
Well, I was being us, and Mary liked it, but she also was very scared of it.
Extremely scared, because I thought, well, this is the thing that everybody hated, you know, so we're just going to be hated forever. And I want to spend more time with you. I kind of respect and interested in what you are.
But let's do the truth thing in private.
But yeah, like let's just tone it down and let's just bring it back and let's just please a few people while we do it. And so it's been such a gift to me that Jesus had done that work on himself to love. I know it's still a work in progress, but really largely love who we are, because it gave me an example that, you know, who I wasn't a horrible thing. You know, I had to work through it emotionally. But
and oftentimes I've, you know, things that Mary has criticised about herself, I'm saying, but that's good, darling. Like that's a good quality you have. And it's also not only a good quality, it's a good personality trait, but it's also like something in harmony with God's truth as well.
Like the truth thing when we met,
so Mary used to say, I'm so ashamed of myself.
I can't let things go.
I can't let the truth go. And I'm going, that's a great thing to not be able to let the truth go. So if Mary Mary's, and myself obviously too, are like dogs with bones when it comes to truth. You know, we're not letting them go. And it doesn't matter what you do, we'll growl at you. So stop trying to have me let it go. You know, and but it's like this was something her family criticised in her. Yeah.
And
my family hated it.
Yeah.
Like, and Mary's family criticised it all the time as well. And so, but I'd sort of, my family divorced me when I was 33. So I had, like I said, 12 years of experience of getting used to everybody sort of hating me because I love truth. You know, everybody around me. I realise many of you don't hate me, you know, because I share the truth. But not everyone's like that, right? And so when Mary and I met, she was sort of like where I was to a 12-year prior, with everybody hating her for being truthful, you know.
Yeah. Anyway.
So, personality.
Yeah. Be it.
Be it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, it is such a joy, isn't it, to be with a person who expresses their personality and nature.
Yeah.
Do you find that? Like, they sort of are engaging, and you listen more to them. And when a person is sort of fake with themselves, you sort of go, do I have to listen to more of this fake or what? Is the general feeling you have. And most of you don't even realise that's going on, but it is in your day-to-day interactions with others. This is why many of you, when you interact with somebody, go, oh boy, this is a boring conversation or whatever, because the person's not being themselves. If the person was being themselves, what I've found is if a person is engaging and being themselves, their personality and nature, it's never boring. Never. Conversations with them are never boring. At home, quite often in a room, because you know they've had daily exposure to God's truth for years and years now, many of them. There's quite often they can be in a room, 30 people, 30 of them expressing their personality and nature. And it's such a joy to be in the company of that amount of people all at once expressing their personality and nature. Yeah.
Yeah.
As you will find out as you progress.
Yeah.
Every celestial spirit knows who they are, knows what their personality is, knows what their nature is, and enjoys it. For themselves, they enjoy their own personality and nature. Yeah. And also when you meet them, it's sort of like, you know, our best friends, you know, in the spirit world, who we meet, you know, obviously every day, and you know, they have such beautiful personalities and natures, and we love every one of them because they're all so different to each other, but they're also, you know, it's so good having friends with completely different feelings and personal behaviours and so forth. Yeah. The celestial spirit world is an immensely blissful place because of one reason is because of that. Because every single person there is expressing their personality and nature every single moment. So every single discussion you have with them, it's there. Every single time you do things with them, it's there. If you go and do some acting on a stage, it's there. If you go and, you know, work in the garden, it's there. You know what I mean? It's just there all the time. And so spending time with people who are doing that is such a joy. And this is a joy that we miss out on a lot on earth because we're so detuned. And we've been taught on earth to conform to a society, conform to a family, conform to a role. Many of you experience that, you know, role of a mother, role of a father, role of a breadwinner, role, you know, roles of worker versus manager, role. And we're taught to conform to these roles to our own detriment and the suffering of our personality. Our personality suffers in those places, and that's something we need to change if we're going to grow. Yeah? We're going to go out the back there. Thanks.
So would that start with being humble, humility? And can you talk a bit about that? Or give an example?
It's an interesting link between humility and personality, isn't it? Because if you think of the main reasons why you're not your true personality, so some of you do know, you have times where you have a bit of a spark about certain things, and then you sort of go, but what's everybody going to think of this? What's everybody going to feel about me doing this? And so if you look at sort of, let's call it nature or personality, your nature, what God has created for you to be yourself, right? In the world we live in, that has been moulding you into conformance, hasn't it? It's been pushing you into a place of conforming all of your life for the most part. To break out of that is going to require quite a lot of humility, isn't it? Because when I asked you, what was your name again? Nikki. When I asked Nikki to stand up and turn around, you could feel almost your own embarrassment doing it, can't you? It's sort of like when you stand up and turn around. And this is what it's like what if you are your personality and nature in front of these people, and there's all this sort of, everyone's got their judgments and their own things. When you stand up and turn around and just say, here I am, this is me, yeah, then you're going to be faced with all of these feelings coming from them, and you're going to have feelings in response to that. Does that make sense? So in order for you to do that, you are going to have to be this.
Jay, can I say, even before you get to doing that, you have to be humble, because like I shared in my experience, I was so opposed emotionally to myself. I had judged myself the way that my family had. I had to be humble enough to feel some of that pain before I could even sort of accept and express any part of my personality. I felt very alienated from who am I. I felt like I am my parents' daughter, and I sort of saw myself as this sort of kind of people-pleasing party girl, I suppose. I thought that's my personality. I didn't think about it, but that's what I conceptualized myself as. And so I had to be humble enough to feel like, to at least start to feel that there was something imposed upon me and not the actual me, before I even started to kind of uncover these other kind of qualities that are my personality. Does that make sense? Yeah.
But I wondered, could you give an example of humility or humbleness or
and a good example, which is really easy to connect to, is let's say you know a truth. The truth is that a friend of yours has had an affair, and she's never told her husband. Let's say that's the truth you know. And if you are going to be yourself around both of them, if you're hiding that truth, you're not going to be able to be yourself, are you? You're going to have to modify yourself. So if you're in the company of her husband, or with both of them together, this is going to be on your mind, and in your feelings you're going to go, but there's this truth, there's this truth, there's this truth, and your conscience is going to bother you. There's this truth, and and also you're going to modify your personality in the sense that you're going to modify what you speak about, what you talk about in front of them, and so forth, because of that truth that you're hiding, right? And that your friend might expect you to hide, right? And your friend might have even gone, I'm telling you this, but you're not allowed to tell anybody. They might have even done that with you. And I would never agree to such a request. But mistakenly, we might agree to such a request. And then now you are modifying, in that moment, you're modifying your very nature, which is to tell the truth. Right? In the moment, that's what you're doing. You're modifying it. And so if you were humble, you would tell the truth and take whatever comes. And whatever comes might be, the husband might be more angry with you than the wife was. Or both of them might be angry with you. Or it could be that you lose that friend forever. that might be the result. And you'd have to feel about that. If you were humble, you would let yourself feel about it, but you would still not allow the modification of your nature by lying about the truth. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
You wouldn't do it. You just wouldn't do it. You couldn't do it. So when somebody says, look, I've got a secret to share with you, and I said, once you share it with me, it's not a secret. You understand? You know, in the spirit world, there are no secrets, by the way. Every person is completely readable. Everything they've done is completely readable. This is one of the challenges you're going to find when you hit the spirit world, is that everything you thought was secret is actually publicly knowable. And it's going to be a major challenge. My feeling is, get over it now. And stop thinking you've got secrets, and just stop acting like you should have secrets, and let yourself work through why you're trying to keep secrets, you know, because nothing is really as confidential as you think it is, right? So, but if you think about what you have to do to cover it, you've actually got to change, and in a lot of ways, you've got to use your mind to go, oh, but I can't say that. Oh, but I can't say that. Oh, but I can't say that. But your feelings are going, I should just be able to say anything. But your mind's going, oh, but I can't, otherwise I'll lose that friend, or I can't, because of a fear, right? It's a fear. Now, humility says, feel your fears. Be truthful still. In that example, you would have to continue to be truthful and let whatever happens, happens. The reality is, from God's perspective, is you're enabling both of them to deal with the problem. It's an act of love to share the truth. In fact, it's an expression of love for them to actually be truthful, even if they've asked you not to be. Sorry, Mike. Yeah.
Yeah, and even if both don't want to know it.
Even if both don't want to know it, because at the end of the day, you're trying to help them both be more loving, and you're trying to help them sort through their issues. And as long as your motive was loving doing it, you should do it. It's as simple as that. If your motive was that you want to hook up with a husband, then obviously a very bad motive, and under those circumstances, you shouldn't do it, right? But if you're being restricted in harmony with truth, and you have the desire to you know, you can feel in yourself the desire to share it, and then nobody around you wants to do it, you are the person who's going to have to be humble towards your own feelings as to what happens as a result, right? So when I come to share truth with you in these events, sometimes I go home and have a cry, because of the levels of projections that I get at times, you know. There's a lot of condescension, ridicule of me, a lot of things. Sometimes you don't realise how much I know about you, and you act like I don't know anything about you. And even that, I sometimes have a cry about. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's so hard sometimes to know a lot of things about a lot of people, but they all think you know nothing. And they're all projecting at you, you know nothing. And so being humble means I've got to go and feel that. If that's how I feel, I need to feel that. Now, eventually, once I work through my feelings, I won't have those feelings anymore. But that's a part of humility, isn't it? You let go of the things that are, you know, difficult and are injuries, and then you're left with the real you. Yep. So there's been many times in the past where I've presented to a group and then whole day, next day cried about what happened. Yeah. Yeah. And so you being you requires that in the end, you're going to have feelings about it, and people are going to have feelings about you being you, because most people are pretty judgmental. And so they're going to have feelings about you being you. And if you're humble, you will just keep being you. Make sense? Yeah. So it's a good question. So humility sort of in practice, if you want to call it that, and we've actually done a whole series of talks about humility, like what humility looks like. And Mary did a series of interviews with me
It's a long time ago.
a long time ago now, must be
2010,
10
maybe,
or
11?
12 or something, about humility and sort of what it sort of looks like. And we didn't cover everything in that series of discussions, but you'll see them on the net. There'll be, if you look up humility, or if you go through the 2010, 11, 12 downloads or something, you might find it there. But this quality is going to be, for me, this quality is the thing that I remind myself about, like, all the time. Be humble, be humble, be humble. Until you become at one with God, you're going to have to remind yourself to be humble, because there'll be feelings you have that are contrary to, that are painful, that will need to be felt. And you want to be happy, but there's these sad feelings that are going to have to be felt. And to feel these sad feelings, you're going to have to be humble enough to feel them and go through them. And the more humble you are, the faster you progress and the faster the truth comes to you. So that's the advantage. The main reason why, and this is going to be a very strange statement for you to hear from me, but I am the most humble person on this earth. I know it might not appear to be, right? Because I'm very definite, aren't I, about the truth. But I know that for a fact. And that's something God has taught. That's why God shared the truth with me. Because he knew that I would be humble in the way I receive it and share it. You know, I won't make it about me. I won't make it about, I'm focused on the truth. And whatever I have to feel, I'm going to feel. Right? Our soul is the most humble soul that's come from this earth. Our celestial friends have had to learn the same levels of humility as we have. Yep. You are going to have the same level of humility if you want a relationship with God that we have. It's going to be necessary, because there are certain truths that you can't absorb without humility. Yep. And that will apply. Humility is an interesting quality because it doesn't only apply, and this is something I'd like to mention to you actually about a number of qualities. So let's look at some qualities. Like there's love, which is a beautiful quality, the most powerful force in the universe actually. I'm talking about God's love now. And then there's truth. Truth is actually a quality as well as an attribute. And when I say a quality, it's something that you will need to develop, but it also can become a trait you have, right? Then there's also humility, right, which is being humble. Then there's also faith, right? Now, we could list other qualities because you can see with these qualities, they're sort of like root or primal qualities. And then based on these qualities, there's other qualities. Like for love, you could say there's things like compassion, kindness. Does that make sense? Like they have sub-aspects to them all. Truth, there's like honesty, transparency. There are sub-aspects to the truth. Humility is like feeling your feelings, like letting yourself be emotional, but it's also like expressing your personality. That's a part of humility. There's also other parts of humility that include things like knowing that you're not the arbiter of your own life, that there is a lawgiver who's the arbiter of your life, the controller of the universe, and that you're not God. You're just, I sort of see myself as ant in comparison to God, like a creation of God. So humility tells me I'm a creation of God. Humility tells me God knows a lot more than I do. Humility is, that quality tells me that. So every one of these qualities have unique sub-aspects to them that all need to be explored and expressed. But when you look at these qualities, the interesting thing about them from a technical perspective is once you develop them, they never disappear. They will stay with you. And they will continue to grow, but they will stay with you for the rest of your life once you develop them. So these qualities are very interesting because they're not related to injuries. See, when, you know, your injuries, like your addictions, so if we compare that with addiction disappears. In fact, God's universe, the laws of God's universe are trying to destroy every single one of your addictions. Like God's purposefully trying to knock all of your addictions on the head. She created all these laws to stop you from having addictions, right? And eventually you will get to the point where you have none. There won't be a single addiction that you have in your entire life. Now, addiction is interesting because you can develop them, and most people on earth develop their addictions like wholeheartedly. They spend like a lifetime refining their addictions, right? Only to find that at some point in the future, every single one of them will need to be destroyed and will be destroyed by the law. The law of compensation destroys your addictions. That's its purpose. So developing these, they're all going to disappear. So what's the point of developing them? What's the point? Like, I know many of us go, but my addiction to drink coffee in the morning is so important to me. And I'm going, well, it's going to be destroyed in the end, so why would you bother keeping it? It only makes sense, doesn't it, to develop things in yourself that you're going to keep for good. You know, would you build a house and the next day a bit of wind comes and it's gone? Or would you prefer to build a house with a firm foundation that monster storms, hurricanes, tornadoes, everything can come, and big mountains of water, and it still stays there? Because that's the difference between you building these qualities and you focusing on on your addictions. Can you get that? It's so important to understand that these qualities, once you start developing, they're going to be permanent aspects of your entire life, right? And you'll get to eventually see that these qualities, which are not a part of your personality, not a part of your nature, they are qualities you need to choose to build. Choose to build. So every one of them has sub-aspects that are all part of what you're going to need to choose to build, like truth. Morality is an issue of truth. Being moral. What is God's truth? Should you do it? What's the right and wrong thing to do? That's a part of truth. So there's all these aspects that are based around those four primary qualities, but there's all these aspects of these qualities that if you develop them, they will become permanent attachments to your soul. In fact, the way it works is once you build these qualities, they become an intrinsic part of your soul, unable to be lost. Right? So what I love about that, and I know that's a bit of a technical sort of thing to say, but what I love about that is it sort of, for me, simplifies my life. I go, I've got the choice of meeting addiction, or I've got a choice of developing something in harmony with humility. If I am logical, it makes no sense to develop my addiction because it's not permanent. It's going to have to be destroyed. So it makes no sense for me to satisfy my addiction even if I want to. It makes more sense for me to just be humble and feel why I want that addiction. That makes a lot more sense because developing that quality is permanent, developing these is temporary, and they're all going to have to disappear anyway. So what's the point of developing something that's going to get rubbed out anyway? There's no point to it. So for me, I just go, as soon as God shows me there's your addiction, I go, got to give it up. It makes no logical sense to keep it. right? And this is something that's intrinsic in Mary and my soul, is that as soon as we notice something in ourselves that is like illogical to keep, we're not going to spend the next 20 years fighting for it, right? Can we come down to Pierre here?
Are we created all equal in terms of developing this for basic quality?
Yes.
Or are there people who have like love for truth that is like your soul, or something that is bigger?
No, we are
creation?
all created equal with regards to the potential of developing these qualities. That's the beauty of it, is that the beauty of equality is that God gives us all the same potential. That's the beauty of equality. Now, there are times in your future where you'll respect the people who come before you. You know, like, so an example of that is like the very first person who created the airplane, or, you know, who actually demonstrated flight was possible. You've got to have some respect for him, don't you? Because they went through a whole lot of trauma to do it, and things that you didn't have to go through to do it, because you just jump in the plane and off you go, right? And he had to, whoever they were, you know, so you look at the Wright brothers and other people who led up to them, you've got to actually respect them in history, because at the end of the day, they did the hard yakka, the hard work, as we say. The hard yakka is a brand of clothing in Australia, but they did the hard work, you know, to get that thing happening. And so surely they're worthy of your respect, given the fact that they were the first, right, on this planet first. So of course you will have respect for the people who were first, but at the end of the day, you can develop the same qualities they have. You know, so, and particularly all these qualities, there's things of the personality and nature you will never have. You know, so your name, Nikki, was? Nikki? So Nikki and Pierre, completely different personalities. That should automatically tell you you're not soulmates, right?
Phew, one down, one
less.
One down. One down, you got to check on. Right? Yeah. So, completely different personality, right? And you will never be Nikki's personality, and she will never be yours. Right? No matter how much she develops qualities in herself, and even if she attempts to mimic it, she will never be able to. You will be your personality, and she will be hers. And so that's different than these qualities. These qualities, you can have just as much love as Nikki. You can have just as much truth in you as Nikki. You can have just as much humility as Nikki. You can have just as much faith as Nikki. You can have just as much love as I do. You can have just as much truth as I do. You can have just as much humility as I do and faith as I do. Does that make sense? God is not saying to anybody, oh, I've got special people for those things. Yeah? And it would make sense, isn't it, if we're all equal, that's true. But when it comes to the expression of your nature and personality, well, that is your unique individuality that God gifted you with, which actually happens to be interesting because it's also a sub-part of God's personality that he's gifted you with, and he's gifted you with some part of his personality that no one else has. And I know it's hard to recognise that because there's billions of souls, and yet every single one of them is different. Mary and I have met many millions of souls in the course of our 2,000 years. I've never met somebody the same. Ever. Right? And we've been around. Right? Never met somebody the same. But when it comes to love, truth, humility and faith, we've met people with very much the same level of faith or level of humility or level of love, very much the same. In fact, everybody who lives in the second sphere of the celestial heavens has exactly the same level of love. Every one of them. That's why they're there. And that's why they're not in the third sphere of the celestial heavens.
Everyone in the second heaven?
Yeah. The second celestial, which is the ninth sphere. Yeah.
Has the same level of humility?
Yes. They had to have.
Faith?
They had to have in order to obtain that love, yes.
But not truth.
Yeah, truth too. They have the same level of truth too. Same level of faith too. Yeah. That's why they're there in that same location. Everybody in the hells in the same location has the same level of love and the same level of truth and the same level of humility and the same level of faith too.
And Jay, there when you're talking about truth, though, you're not saying that they know exactly all the same truths. They just have the quality of truth in them, which is something different.
Yeah, but they also know the same truths in the sense of they're devoid of or have the same amount of truth as everybody else there, in the sense of that same amount of truth is available to them, but also they are able and are in a state where they would recognise it if it was presented anyway.
Yeah.
So they are in the same level of development when it comes to the absorption of truth.
Because, like, truth is not facts, you know? There's a difference.
Well, it involves facts.
Yes,
it's
but
one of the
it's not,
subparts of truth. But
Yeah.
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 Yeah, it's not the quantity of truth they know. It's the more
no,
the quality.
Everybody in the in the seventh sphere of the spirit world, which is just before the celestial heavens, they all know that there's one truth they're working on to get to the eighth sphere. I've already told you what it was a few days ago. Giving up the mind. They all know that.
But some of them might know more about building bridges than, you know, some of them might know more about harmony or whatever.
Or some know more about music and some know more about... So the things that are not dependent upon condition, some will know more because it's more dependent upon personality. You see, so my musical bent, and if you've ever listened to me play, it's not very good, is a lot worse than many of my friends in the seventh sphere. You follow? But, you know, some of them are like geniuses with music. You follow me? And so I'm not the one writing their, you know, what you would now call on earth, you know, their Beethoven symphonies. They are, because they're geniuses, you know. That's a part of the expression of their personality. But when it comes to listening to God about God's truth, right, our soul's the genius. And your soul will be a genius with some other thing, you know, and there will be aspects of your soul. And it's not like you can't develop those things. So Mary and I love music, and it's not like, you know, we can't play it. And also in music in the spirit world is interesting because the intensity and the what you can actually play is dependent on your soul condition. So if you're really good soul condition, you end up being pretty good at music as well. Like so the reality is that our soul is better at music than anyone in the seventh sphere. But if those people were in the same condition we were, then their soul would be better at it. Do you follow me? Because it's part of their personality, it's not a part of mine so much. Eh? So this is the thing, is it gives you this scope. The beautiful thing about the way God's created everything is it gives you this scope of development. And this is one of the things I would like to say to you this morning is this. Most people on earth have no concept about how much God loves you, how much God wants your happiness, how much he wants your joy, how much he wants your expression, your freedom of expression, your nature, your personality. He has designed an entire universe as your playground to firstly discover who you are and then be who you are in harmony with the principles of his laws. Right? He's given you this unlimited scope that becomes more unlimited the more you live in harmony with the law of love. That's the irony of the law of love, is that it's like it's not restrictive. It's expansive. And if you think about the restriction-based laws, they're all restricting bad decisions, bad choices, bad condition of love. That's what they restrict. But if you're in a good condition of love, there's no restrictions. Right? And isn't that beautiful? Like, God's given you this opportunity to receive of his love so that you can get into these conditions. And he cares about you as individuals. He created your nature and personality, and he knows you better than anyone else will ever know you, aside perhaps from your soulmate. But even then, he knows you and your soulmate together as one unit, your soul, better than anybody else will ever know that soul. And not only that, he also knows your soul's potential better than you know your own soul's potential. Right? He cares about you as individuals. He loves you, wants your happiness, wants your future to be secure. Right? And the more of God's love you receive, the more you will know that. You'll come to feel that. And once you feel that, it also increases your bravery and your courage and decreases your fear. Can you see why? Because if you're secure in your relationship with God and you're secure in the fact that you are like God's loved child, do you think you would worry so much about where your next meal's coming from and worry so much about the next door neighbour hating you today and worried so much about, what's happening in the world in China tomorrow and, worry so much about the storm coming tonight? Or can you see you'd be much more secure in your day-to-day life and less concerned? You'd feel more safe. And these are all the blessings that come from, that God wants to gift you through the expression of her love. God wants to gift you these things. And so the key, and the only key is, do you want them? And not just do you want them, but how much do you want them? Like, if you only want them a little bit, then you're probably only going to get a little bit. Yeah? So a lot gets down to this other quality that is a part of faith. So this is a sub-point of faith, and that's the quality of desire. Right? Desire is an aspect of faith. It's going to get down to how much you desire it for yourself as to what's going to happen for your future with regard to your relationship with God. It's going to boil down to this: how much faith do you have that this is available to you and that you would like it? In the Paget messages, there's a message from Solomon, a very short message, and he was asked by James Paget, what was the most important thing in the universe? And Solomon, in his wisdom, said, love on the part of God and faith on the part of humans. And he said that because without faith, you will never receive the love. And this is why on Friday, we had the conversation with you about developing more faith in God. You see, a lot of times we think, I'm not receiving God's love because I've got this problem or that addiction, or I don't understand this and I don't understand that, and I don't really get my head around this idea or concept. No, that's not why. The only reason why we don't receive God's love is because we lack faith. We lack desire. We lack desire for it. Yeah. And now there might be many reasons why you lack your desire. To address them. If you think of all the problems you face currently, right now in your life, the most important one is probably the one you haven't thought about very much, and that is the problems you have with God. Those problems are the ones affecting you the most. If we could write a priority system of all of your problems, somebody might say, I've just broken up from my wife or husband, or my child's going through this terrible trauma, and I want to know how to help them. And there's all, we could raise a lot of things, couldn't we? Like, I'm in this country that's getting abused by other countries, and like Ukraine or whatever, and getting attacked, and so that's really bad, and whatever you could say are the problems, none of them are as big as the single problem of your resistance towards God's love. Not a single one of them. And yet that's the opposite way we think. We sort of go, if I address this problem and I address that problem and I address that problem and I address that problem, once I get down to being calm with all of those problems, then I can focus attention on God. And I'm saying to you, no, you got to, what we say in Australia, arse about. In other words, instead of head first, right? You've got it back to front. The real problem is that if we can address our issues with God as a priority, so issues with God's authority, issue with God's laws, issue with God's nature and personality. Many of us have issues with God's nature and personality. We think God's terrible. You know, we've been educated by religion to think that God is a monster, that an egomaniac. We've been educated by religion and by others to believe God doesn't even exist. You know, so we've got problems with God, but if we could solve our problems with God first, then, as I said in the first century, every other problem you will easily find a solution, because the King of the universe, God, right, can talk to you about it. And God knows, she knows every problem you have. And she knows the cause of every one of them. And she knows what you need to do to fix every one of them. And if you could have a relationship with God, you'd fix everything else. Right? So the relationship with God is such a practical thing for your life. It's such an important thing to let yourself feel about and particularly focus on, with priority in your life, focus on all the reasons why you don't have one. Like, put that first. Like, my suggestion to you is, I know that these other problems that you have family problems and friend problems and, you know, economic problems, and there's all sorts of problems that we have on earth. All of these problems all have solutions, but the issue really is, well, who can provide me with a solution? And also, all of these problems are nowhere near as important to your future as the problem you have with God. And I know because God's so quiet and mild and unassuming. This blows me away about God, is that God's not going to force herself on you. God's not going to control your life and force you to have a relationship with her. So she's so mild and unassuming and about, you know, what she's offering you. She loves you, cares about you, nurtures your existence, even if you don't care about her. And yet she's just waiting for you to make this decision to put it first. And then all these other things will be fixed. All these other things will be added to you. If you do it sincerely, that's what happens. And so I can't sort of express to you enough the need to sort of readjust your lifestyle so that you can put God as your priority and try to have this relationship with God. Now, you're going to get frustrated because at the beginning you got so many addictions that you're going to try to have them with God, you know. But God will sort that out with you if you're sincere. That'll be sorted as well. Your addictions will be confronted. You'll have to let them go. That'll all go as well. God has the means, and we might talk about that a little bit after our lunch, the means to share truth with you directly, so that you can work on these qualities and grow in love and receive more of God's love. God has the ability to share truths with you about why that's not working and why you can't receive love and all those things. But it requires some sincerity and honesty with yourself on your part to work out whether you really care about it very much. You know? Because a lot of the things we care about are nowhere near as important to you as your future with God. Yeah. We go up the back. Just leave your hand up so they know.
I would like to ask, how does God feel about the world, the people getting more addictions and intenser, I guess? So everyone is in addiction,
yeah,
and not humble enough to receive God's love, I guess. So
Let's talk a bit about how God feels about that.
yeah,
Just for maybe 5 minutes. God feels in creating you, and therefore every one of you, I'm not just talking about you individually, but every one of you, God feels that in creating you, he created the best being in the universe. You are the pinnacle of his creations. You are the most powerful, unique, beautiful of all of his creations. All of them. So the only thing better than you is God.
Yeah, but I wanted...
No, just let me finish. The only thing better than you is God. So this is how God feels about you. So when he sees you sin, he can see you're not living up to your potential. And remember, all of your addictions are sins. So every time we engage more addiction, what we're doing is we're sinning. And then every time he sees you sin, he's going, now you're not living up to the potential of what I created you to be. So first thing God has about that is compassion. Now notice, I'm not saying the first thing he has about that is anger. You see, if you think about your own parents, if they said, you're not living up to your potential, you should, they'd probably be a bit upset about it, right? Because they sort of see you as a reflection of them and so forth. And this is why parents have a tendency to get a bit upset about children not living up to potential. But all God feels is compassion, because he's going, you made the choice to not live up to your potential. And God feels, I gave you free will, and you're allowed to make the choice of not living up to your potential. There's going to, of course, be disadvantages. You're going to break the law, then there's going to be penalties associated with law because of you not deciding you don't want to live up to your potential. You're going to engage sin, and the consequences of sin are pain and suffering, so you're going to have some pain and suffering for not living up to your potential. You could be perfect, right? Because receiving God's love, you can receive God's love to the point of perfection, human perfection. And by not receiving it and by not living up to potential, you're not going to be perfect for as long as you choose to do that. And so God has compassion for the choices we're making, not rage. So not rage. Now, if you think about all the world's religions will tell you that God's angry with you when you sin, right? They even say things like, God's not angry with the sinner, but he's angry with the sin. No, he's not. He's not angry with the sin because he has compassion for the fact that he gave you the gift of free will, and in that expression of free will, you're allowed to sin. If you want to. Of course, you're breaking a law, and the law is going to cause its penalty, and therefore he has compassion that you do the silly thing of choosing to sin. Because from God's perspective, he's looking and just going, you could choose not to sin and you'd be happier. Right? And I even want to help you be happier, but you want to sin, so what can I do? It's your will, and he's giving you the freedom to make the choice and the exercise of your will. Now, how God feels about it is, you could say, only compassion. God doesn't feel disappointed that he gave you will and you're not using it well. He's happy that he gave you will, and he's happy that at least you're using it, even if it's in disharmony with his laws, to your own detriment. You follow? So he has this level of feeling for humanity that he wants to rescue you from your pain and suffering, but he can't do it by forcing his opinions and laws and truth and love on you. You're going to have to embrace a process to correct it. Not only does he have compassion, he has this feeling, this other feeling, which is this. Humans are responsible. In giving you the gift of free will, he's basically said to you, you are now responsible about how you use it. Right? So he's saying, I'm not responsible for how you use the gift I gave you. So it's simple as, let's say I thought, what was your name again?
Meerte.
Meerte, that's right. So Meerte, let's say I thought, Meerte, I've been in your kitchen and you need a decent knife. So I, out of my love for you, I go out, find a really, really good knife, buy it for you and give it to you. And then one day you get suicidal and you kill yourself with it. Am I responsible? Right? The knife is a good gift. It was useful for you. It was something that you could use in a positive manner, but you chose to use it in a self-harming manner, or you could say a sinful manner. Right? So you chose to use it in a manner that's going to harm yourself. Now, I'm not responsible because I gave you the gift with the intention that you use it for a different intention. Right? God is saying to you, I'm giving you the gift of free will, but you're responsible about its outcome. You're responsible about educating yourself about how to use it positively. You're also responsible for every time you use it negatively. You're responsible for the outcomes of every time you use it negatively, but you're also going to be rewarded positively for every time you use it lovingly. And so God's happy that he did that for you. You follow? He's not upset that you go, oh, but I'm going to get that gift and I'm going to, rape and pillage with it.
I would like to ask for how does God feel about humanity being in the state that they are? Does God grieve too?
He has compassion.
He has compassion.
Exactly what I've said to him. He feels about you is how he feels about humanity.
His own creation.
Can we add another one? Calm.
Yeah.
He feels calm about it because he knows that he's created a system of law that even if people don't seek him out, it will correct it. So he sees what's happening, and a lot of us can see it's not good what's happening, and he can see it's not good because people are going to create, pain and suffering for themselves and each other. But he feels very calm because he knows I've got laws for that. I've got laws that will bring about really the redemption of everyone in the end.
Okay.
But Marita, can I just say to you, the question you've asked is because you're not feeling God, isn't it? See, you would never have asked that feeling if you could just feel God and go to God,
I know.
How do you feel?
That's why I'm asking you.
Yeah, that's right. That's why you're asking me. And this is the problem that you face, and this is something that is worth considering. If you keep asking me questions you should be asking God, who are you going to develop a relationship with?
I was going to ask God too. Now I'm here, so...
Can you see that if you ask me, you're going to develop a relationship with me, but not with God? And what I'm trying to encourage you to do is to ask God. Now, all of you have the capacity to ask God all sorts of questions and receive answers. So after we have a 20-minute eating break now, if we can come back about 1:30, if that's all right, and we'll talk about how do you ask and how do you get answers.
Thank you.
Yes.
Sound all right? Yeah. Okay.